He was told to wait outside, just the pizza guy. But when he glanced at the whiteboard, he saw the flaw in their $100 million plan and fixed it in seconds. The CEO's jaw hit the floor. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. You lost $100 million and still can't solve it? Those were the words no one expected to hear from the man holding 5 pizza boxes at the door. It was irregular. Thursday at Arian Tech, a high-profile startup riding the fine edge between brilliance and bankruptcy. Their flagship software, developed to predict logistics disruptions in real time, had a bug, a deep, complex flaw in its core algorithm. The bug wasn't just annoying, it was fatal. The algorithm kept collapsing under certain conditions, making the system unreliable. Arian was on the verge of securing a $200 million contract with the Department of Defense. But after 2 failed demos and a last-chance review looming, $100 million in investor money was hanging by a thread. The top engineers, graduates from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech, were flown in. The boardroom, a sleek, glass-walled space overlooking the downtown skyline, had turned into a war room. Whiteboards were covered in dense equations and flowcharts. Laptops buzzed with simulations. Coffee cups stacked high like sandbags. CEO Lauren Haynes, barely 40 but already graying at the temples, stood near the board watching her lead data scientist argue with a senior AI architect. Everyone was tense, silent, panicked. The contract was slipping away. That's when the door swung open. "Delivery for Arian Tech," said a calm, baritone voice. Heads turned. There stood a tall black man in a black t-shirt and jeans, a stack of 5 pizza boxes in his arms. His name tag read Derek. He looked no older than 30, but his posture carried a quiet confidence, like someone who knew exactly where he stood, even if it happened to be in a room of multimillionaires. "Just leave it on the table, Einstein," one executive muttered, half smirking. A few nervous chuckles followed. No one had time for this. Derek smiled, nodded, and stepped inside. But instead of leaving immediately, his gaze fixed on the giant whiteboard. Formulas, graphs, a sea of red X's and slashes. "You lost $100 million, he said. "And still can't solve it?" Silence. Lauren blinked. "Excuse me." Derek tilted his head. "That's a covariance collapse issue in multivariate time series prediction. You're modeling too tightly on noisy variables. No wonder it fails in live environments." Everyone stared. A junior engineer looked at the board, then back at Derek. "Wait, how do you know that?" "I read fast," Derek said casually. "Also, your matrix assumptions are wrong. You're using Gaussian priors in a chaotic system. That doesn't hold. Your output's overfitting past 3 sigma." The room went still. The lead scientist stepped forward. "Okay, who are you?" Derek placed the pizzas down, walked to the board, and picked up a marker like he owned the place. "I used to tutor graduate stats at Berkeley before dropping out," he said, starting to scribble quickly. "Built a prediction model for crypto markets that sold last year. Took this job just to clear my head." "What are you doing now?" one of the engineers asked. "Showing you how to fix the core of your model before your whole platform crashes." "Again." And he did in under 15 minutes. Derek redrew the architecture. Instead of relying solely on Gaussian noise, he suggested a hybrid framework, a Bayesian neural network with dynamic parameter tuning based on real-time entropy variance. In simpler terms, it would adapt, like nature does, skeptical at first. The team coded the changes into a simulation. By the time the pizzas were cold, the model ran 600% more stable than before. The collapse was gone. The predictions worked. Live feeds passed. Someone whispered, "Holy hell." Lauren looked at Derek like he was a ghost or a lifeline. "Do you want a job?" she asked. He shrugged. "Nah, not right now. But I'll take a bonus slice of pepperoni." She laughed. A real one for the first time in days. As Derek walked out the door, one of the junior analysts caught up to him in the hallway. "How'd you see it that fast?" Derek smiled. "Sometimes the people with answers aren't in the room because no one thought to feed them." That evening, Arian sent a final model to the Department of Defense. It passed. The deal was signed. Back in the office kitchen, someone taped a photo to the whiteboard. Derek, holding pizza, under the caption, "The $100 million delivery." As Derek placed the pizzas down, he couldn't help but read what was on the Bored.to most. It was a mess of symbols and equations, unreadable without years of specialized education. But to Derek, it was something else. A puzzle. A puzzle speaking a language he hadn't used in a while. He squinted, reading a dense block of code scribbled beside a flowchart of the system's architecture. Lines looped into each other, memory. Stacks bulging in the notes. The dev team was clearly trying to optimize performance. But something wasn't right. He spoke, hesitantly. The errors in your function assumption. You're looping a variable that's supposed to stay constant. The room paused. A few heads turned. Not out of curiosity, but annoyance. One executive leaned back, exchanging a smirk with a colleague. Another chuckled under his breath. Someone muttered, "Of course." The pizza guy figured it out. One man, sharply dressed in a navy suit, waved a dismissive hand. "Thanks for the pizza," he said without looking at Derek. "Now let the engineers handle the math." Laughter flickered in the air like static, but Derek didn't move. His voice stayed calm, even, like he wasn't there to prove anything, just to share a fact. "Right here," he said, stepping closer to the board and pointing to a specific line of logic near the bottom. If you isolate B instead of forcing it into the compound function, you reduce the memory overload and avoid the recursive crash. You're solving a loop that shouldn't exist. The laughter stopped. From across the room, Samira Patel, the lead developer, furrowed her brow. She stood slowly, stepping closer to the board, scanning the section Derek had pointed out. Her eyes widened. Wait a second," she said, her voice trailing off. Her finger traced the code. "That actually makes sense." She began muttering under her breath, doing mental math, running through use cases. She pulled her laptop over, typing furiously. The room grew quiet again, but this time, not with dismissal, with curiosity. "Hold on," said Caleb, a senior systems architect. "What do you mean by isolating B? You're saying that variable isn't dynamic?" Derek nodded. "You're treating it like it changes per call, but in your dataset, it's constant across runs. You're assigning unnecessary resources each cycle. It's like fixing a table leg that isn't broken, over and over, until the table falls." Caleb blinked, then cursed under his breath. "Son of a, he's right. We flagged that last week, but we assumed it was a memory leak." Lauren, the CEO, stood in the corner, arms crossed tightly. She didn't speak, just watched. Samira looked up from her laptop. "I just ran a dry test with Derek's suggestion. It shaved 40% off our processing time and cleared 3 previous fail points." The boardroom stirred. Chairs shifted. Executives leaned forward. "Who is this guy?" someone whispered. Derek, still holding a marker in one hand, shrugged. "Just a guy who used to code a lot. Built models for fun. Gave it up a while ago." Lauren finally spoke. "Where did you study?" He smiled faintly. "Didn't finish. Started at Berkeley. Dropped out second year. Real life got in the way." Someone near the back frowned. "And you're delivering pizzas now?" Derek raised an eyebrow, still calm. "It pays the bills and gives me time to think." Samira stepped aside, giving him full access to the board. "Derek, do you want to walk us through the logic? If this holds, you might have just saved us." He nodded, and for the next 15 minutes, the delivery man led a room full of top-tier engineers through the exact logic breakdown of their failing system. He moved with precision, not arrogance. Every point he made was backed by logic, and, when questioned, he didn't flinch. He welcomed the challenges. And each one, he answered with clarity. By the end, the simulation had passed all previous failure cases. A bug that had cost weeks and millions was neutralized. The room, once filled with tension and doubt, was now silent in awe. Lauren looked at him again, this time not as a pizza guy, but as someone who just prevented the collapse of her company. "Derek, what would it take to bring you in full time?" He looked around, at the suits, the glowing monitors, the formulas, then down at his delivery uniform. "Not sure yet," he said with a quiet grin. "But I'd start with warming up those pizzas. Cold slices are a crime." That afternoon, the board approved the fix. The DoD meeting was back on. Investors breathed easier. And somewhere, in the break room, Samira pinned a sticky note to the fridge. "Give the pizza guy a whiteboard." Derek stepped up to the board, hesitated, then asked, "Mind if I show you real quick?" A few chuckles floated through the boardroom. Suits exchanged looks. This was Aryan Tech's most critical hour, and a pizza guy was offering to fix their code. The idea would have been laughable if it wasn't for the quiet conviction in Derek's voice. Lauren, the CEO, leaned back in her chair. Sharp, calculating eyes studied him for a second longer than necessary. Then, with a sigh and a dismissive flick of her wrist, she said, "Sure. Let's hear what the pizza guy has to say." Derek nodded once and approached the whiteboard. The room watching him like an experiment they weren't sure would succeed or explode. He grabbed the marker. His hand hovered over the board. He scanned the problem once more, his mind running through 100 possibilities per second. Then, he started to write .in under 30 seconds. He rewrote the entire core function .no wasted steps. No bloated logic. Just clean, efficient structure. He broke down the looping variable issue, what they'd thought was a recursive flaw, and then replaced the entire loop with a logic chain that bypassed the problem completely. No force-fitting. No patchwork. He was solving the wrong problem by showing them the right one. When he stepped back, the room was silent, like pin drop silent. It wasn't the silence of disbelief. It was the silence of realization. The kind that hits when someone shows you the answer you didn't even know you were missing. Samira stared at the board, her mouth parted slightly, eyes scanning the new function. She blinked twice, looked at her laptop, and whispered, "Run it." Now, her assistant jumped into action, typing the changes into the test environment. Fingers moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and disbelief. The test server initialized. The application loaded. The data streamed. No error. No lag. No spike in memory usage. And then, no crash. The room held its breath. The simulation completed. Green. Check marks across the board. It worked. Samira's head jerked up. No crash, no bug. It actually worked. Murmurs turned to gasps. Chairs scraped. Engineers leaned closer to their screens. Run the stress test, someone shouted. Try it with real-time inputs. Another added. Everything ran smoothly. No anomalies. No failures. Lauren stood now, her tone sharp and cutting through the noise. Tell me this isn't a fluke. Samira answered without looking away from the screen. It's not. He fixed the logic entirely. The model's running smoother than we've ever seen it. The man who had walked in holding 5 pizzas had just solved a problem that had eluded Stanford grads, senior engineers, and weeks of sleepless nights. One of the executives who had laughed earlier now looked like he'd swallowed his tie. Derek just stood there, hands in his pockets, like it was just another day. Caleb, the systems architect, looked over at him. What? How did you see that? Derek shrugged. You were trying to make a broken path walkable. I just built a different road. Someone in the back started clapping. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire boardroom erupted into applause. Not polite applause, grateful applause. Relieved. Almost in awe, Lauren approached Derek directly now. Her tone had shifted entirely. All right, she said. Who are you really? Because I don't believe for a second that you're just some pizza delivery guy. Derek smiled modestly. I'm Derek. I studied applied math and systems logic. Before I had to drop out. Built a few things on my own, sold 1 or 2. These days, I like my work simple. Quiet. Why didn't you say something earlier? Samira asked. Derek shrugged again. Didn't think anyone would listen. Not until I saw the mistake. Lauren looked at her team, then back at him. We need you. Full-time. Name your terms. He chuckled. Honestly, I just came to drop off pizza. Samira stepped in. Then stay for dinner. On us. You just saved this company. And as the team gathered around him, firing questions, taking notes, and rerunning tests, Derek finally sat down, with a warm slice in hand, a quiet grin on his face, and a whiteboard behind him now filled not with errors, but with possibility. Who are you? The CEO asked, stunned. The room had just watched a man in a black t-shirt and faded jeans rewrite the very code that had brought an entire tech empire to its knees. Derek looked up from his seat, where he was finally enjoying a slice of the pizza he brought in, and offered a modest smile. Just a guy who loves math and delivers pizza while saving up to finish his degree, he said. I dropped out to help my mom through her medical bills. You could almost feel the room stop breathing for a moment. The sharp-suited executives, the senior engineers with PhDs, the polished assistant who'd earlier rolled her eyes, all staring at the man they had underestimated so completely. Lauren, the CEO, blinked. You're not just a guy. Where did you study? Derek leaned back a little. MIT, computer science and applied mathematics. I left 2 years ago when my mom was diagnosed. The insurance didn't cover half of it. That quiet admission hit like a whisper and a punch. But I never stopped studying, he continued. I read textbooks between deliveries, watch algorithm debates instead of TV, solve problems on napkins while waiting for tips. He chuckled softly. I guess it's just how my brain works. Samira, still processing what had just happened, looked at him with awe. You're telling me that you, what, study algorithmic theory after work? Derek shrugged. It helps me sleep. The boardroom, just minutes ago tense and dismissive, was now reverent. Humbled that he hadn't just identified the error. He hadn't just fixed the system. He had done what their best and brightest had failed to do for weeks, in under 30 minutes. And he hadn't done it for money, credit, or recognition. He'd done it out of curiosity, for the sheer love of logic. Suddenly, they didn't see a delivery guy, they saw a mind, a brilliant one. One with untapped potential. One that had been overlooked not because it lacked value, but because it lacked a spotlight, and the same executives, who had mocked him earlier, now scrambling to shake his hand. Point one stepped forward awkwardly, smiling like he hadn't just made a snide remark 20 minutes ago. I'm David, CTO, he said, reaching out. What you did here, incredible. Really. Derek stood, wiped his hand, and shook it. Thanks. Another exec chimed in. If you're ever thinking of finishing that degree, we'd be happy to sponsor. Lauren raised a hand and cut in firmly. Actually, Derek, I'd like to make you an offer. Right now. She stepped forward. All eyes were on her. I don't care what your resume says. What I saw here today, that's genius. You saved this company $100 million, and maybe our future. She looked around the room for a beat, then locked eyes with him again. Forget entry level. How about joining our R&D team as a consultant? Part-time to start, fully remote if you prefer. We'll match your MIT tuition if you want to return. And your salary starts the minute you say yes. The room went quiet again. Derek blinked, caught off guard for the first time that day. I don't even know what to say, he replied. Say yes, Samira said quickly. We need you. A few chuckles rippled through the team, but it wasn't just humor. It was relief. Hope. Derek looked down at the whiteboard, now filled with his clean, working logic. Then at the pizza boxes, now mostly empty. And finally at the people in the room, those who dismissed him, who now looked at him like he was their best shot. That he nodded slowly. All right, he said. But only if you let me finish my slice first. Laughter broke out. Lauren grinned. Deal. As Derek sat back down, half coder, half hero, the boardroom shifted. Not just in tone, but in mindset. They had seen brilliance come through the door in the most unexpected form. And somewhere inside every executive, engineer, and intern in that room, something changed. Because that day, the guy with 5 pizza boxes didn't just save their algorithm. He rewrote the formula for what potential really looks like. That same afternoon, Derek was offered a full-time position at Arian Tech as a lead algorithm analyst. The offer came quickly, almost too quickly. After all, he had just saved the company from financial collapse, restoring confidence among investors, partners, and the government agency poised to sign a contract worth hundreds of millions. The boardroom buzzed with gratitude, admiration, and urgency. Everyone wanted him on the team immediately. But Derek, as calm and grounded as ever, politely shook his head. I'll accept, he said. Only if I can finish my degree first. Education comes first. For a moment, the room fell quiet again. It wasn't the answer they expected. Not from someone offered a prestigious, high-paying tech role at one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. But in that moment, they saw the real Derek. Not just the brilliant mind, but the man who never forgot where he came from. Lauren, the CEO, smiled. She admired his integrity even more than his intellect. Fair enough, she said. But on one condition. The room turned to her. Arian Tech will pay for your full tuition. Housing, living expenses, everything. You saved us millions. The least we can do is invest in you. Derek stood there, stunned. For the first time that day, he didn't have a clever answer, just quiet gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, he said. I'll make it worth it. Months passed. Derek returned to MIT. His name now whispered in academic circles as the kid who fixed a billion-dollar bug. Professors invited him to guest lectures. Startups emailed him job offers. But Derek stayed focused, head down, determined to earn his degree on his own terms. And he did. 2 semesters later, he walked across the graduation stage with honors, his diploma in one hand and the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what came next. Because this time, he wasn't returning with pizza. He was returning with purpose. Back at Arian Tech, Derek walked through the front doors, not as a delivery guy, but as the company's youngest ever senior data strategist. A new badge hung around his neck. A custom office waited for him. And more importantly, a team. Engineers, analysts, researchers, eager to work under the mind who'd once pointed out a fatal flaw while standing in sneakers and carrying pepperoni. He wasted no time. The code he'd written that day in the boardroom had since evolved into a proprietary system framework. Now, with his full focus behind it, the framework matured into something even more powerful. A predictive algorithm suite capable of stabilizing and optimizing complex data environments. Today, that code lives on in a system used by defense agencies, logistics firms, and Fortune 500 companies across the globe. They call it the Derek Patch. In internal meetings and public briefings, it's listed like any other software enhancement. But to those who were there that day, it's more than a patch. It's a symbol, a reminder that brilliance doesn't always come with credentials, titles, or tailored suits. Sometimes, it comes with 5 pizza boxes and a sharp eye. And what about Derek? He's still the same humble genius. He wears hoodies to meetings, listens more than he speaks, mentors interns, keeps his mom's photo on his desk, and every Friday, without fail, he treats the office to pizza from the same shop he once worked at. Not because he has to, but because he remembers the lesson hidden in that moment. The day when someone gave him a chance, not based on what was on his resume, but based on what he knew. And now, whenever new hires walk past the framed photo in the hallway, Derek's standing in front of that whiteboard, pizza boxes stacked beside him. They're told the story of how the company was saved not by a boardroom decision or a 6-figure consultant, but by a quiet kid with a brilliant mind and a delivery uniform. The one who walked in as the pizza guy and walked out a legend. Sometimes, the smartest mind in the room doesn't wear a suit. They wear a delivery bag. Never judge someone's worth by their job title. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories that prove brilliance comes from the most unexpected places. Until next time, stay inspired.